Hello, everybody. Another episode of Insurance 360. And of course, we always talk about it's the Bob and Rob show. But today, those of you that know Rob, he's not here. So we were able to drag up one of our important individuals, been here for about 10 years or so, Mr. Mark Bolger.
Welcome.
Mark, welcome, Insurance 360.
Great to be here.
No, absolutely. But realistically, it's probably better that we have Mark here. You know, as much as we love Rob, we're going to talk a little bit about some ancillary products, but a little bit more combination of life and health products and whatnot. We actually have special guest today, our good friend from Assurity Life, Mr. Pat Kane, VP over there. Pat, welcome to the episode, man. We're glad we grabbed you for a couple minutes.
This is awesome. Anytime you can get in there with Mark Bolger. Are you kidding me? This is great.
I know. We feel honored that he is here with us today. Yeah,
I am
absolutely.
special.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you guys so much. You're too kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pat, we had some good times here earlier this year, and we were joking about a great picture that you and I kind of laughed about today. You with Elvis as we did our championship event in Vegas this year at Allegiant Stadium. So you guys were out there, had a booth, great energy. Venue was awesome. But you got a chance to see kind of what we're doing, right? A little bit about, our agents and some of the challenges that they're coming up against and a lot of the industry stuff that's happening today. So, what did you hear from the championship event? Give us the carrier perspective.
First of all, when you get a chance to spend about 30 minutes with Elvis and talk to him about all kinds of stuff, it can't get better than that, right? I listened to a couple of your other.
He was in the
He
building.
was in the building. He was
There
in
you
the
go.
building. Really a great dude. The venue was great. I know a couple of your other podcasts you've talked about it. Certainly a great event. You guys did a phenomenal job. And I'll say, kind of from a selfish point of view, I think the timing for Surety to be there was amazing for a couple things. One, we do have a life insurance and disability focus for our products, but we do have critical illness, we have accident, we have AD&D. So we have a broad range of cool products. And the reason I bring that up is because we're relatively new with Pinnacle. We've been working with you guys maybe just about a year now, where we signed on. It gave us and my team from Assurity the ability to really see what Pinnacle's all about, not just what Mark and Greg do on a daily basis. I talk to them all the time. We're doing stuff every day, but it really helped us talk to the people, talk to other advisors you work with that are in multiple different lines of markets. And it really helped position everything, which I think is the value for every advisor that was there. If there was an advisor who left there and said, I didn't really get anything out of this, then that's probably somebody you don't want to be working with anyways, because there was just so much great content. And I listened to one of your other podcasts, and I have to agree, obviously one of those, the panels got a little bit contentious, but guess what? That's okay. I don't know. We're all parts of families, right? And don't tell me that you don't get along once in a while with your family members and start arguing about stuff. So I thought that was super valuable. So overall, kind of long-winded there, but I thought it was a great event. I think you guys did a great job. I love the idea of including all the different disciplines and product lines in there because it really does just open up conversations. It opens up, hey, you could do to help. Medicare's changing, right? You're going to have some decrease in revenue. What can you do without going too far out of your comfort zone? Because the bottom line is, whether it is Medicare, ACA, life, DI, it's all risk management, right? We're all in the same business. We all have the same basic story. And we have different product lines to meet those needs, but we're all there, and Pinnacle offers all of them.
You're right, man. It makes sense right now. I mean, we've been pounding the drum for what we call the cross-sell opportunities, but really, these are just additional pain points that we have put a lot of time, effort, and energy discussing with our agent partners about. These are things that you're just not discussing right now, but they're important things that your clients would like to discuss with you. And you're right. It's not necessarily just adding a hospital indemnity plan to a Medicare Advantage. There are a lot of other pain points and opportunities to help clients across the board. So I know with Mark and his team, they sort of focus on that more of the life insurance side of things. But in talking with Mark and Greg, even just yesterday, our phone rings off the hook more than it ever has about agents that are in the senior market looking for these other opportunities, right, Mark?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're getting tons of interest in, the living benefits. What plans can I offer my clients that, are going to cover, you know, long-term care costs? Should I get them a critical illness plan or, terminal illness, chronic illness? Like, what's the best way to go? My clients currently experiencing some health issues, so all of that stuff is something that's obviously very important. Things that we need to be educating our agents on. Again, there's just a huge need for it. So we're like Bob said, we're getting tons of calls and traction for those.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
working, Pat. It's working, and we really have just shifted that mindset because a lot of stuff comes down to mindset. I'll see posts sometimes, and it's people that are in the industry, and they're like, "How can you sell that product?" Or how can an agent feel good about selling that product? And I think that's really naive to think that way because you weren't at the table when that agent was talking to an individual who probably brought up a specific pain point around something,
Yeah.
whether it was they had a life insurance need and simplified issue in the senior market. Listen, it's a necessary product to have there because a lot of times there are some underwriting concerns, Pat, and it's just those products are getting better and better. And you guys are a perfect example of that. You've got simplified issue, but really on some very strong products that agents are just taking hold of right now. We're seeing a lot of traction come from that. So is that what you're seeing? Are you seeing an uptick as well? In those kind of opportunities?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I liken it when I'm doing meetings and not long after the championship event, Mark had me down in Connecticut and we did a meeting with Tracy Bryan and O'Brien and her team. Right. And one of the things I liken to is like throwing a rock in a pond, right? All the ripples that come out of it. We do have our focuses, right? We do focus on Medicare. I focus on life. I focus on disability. But the reality is, the mindset of, well, we shouldn't leave anything on the table. We should just, make sure we're selling everything. Well, that's not entirely true either. But what is true is that, to your point, Bob, is that there's stuff that can be done that may not be in our expertise or our wheelhouse. But if we know just a couple points, bullet points, we can make sure we insure to them. An example of Mark just mentioned long term care. Perfect example of, a lot of people need long term care for obvious reasons, right? One of the things to think about with long term care, though, is usually there's a 90-day wait period. So, what happens for that 90 days? Well, if you own a critical illness policy and you had a stroke and you need to go into, an assisted living for a little while or to rehab for a little while, you're going to be able to have those assets in those 90 days not come out of your portfolio, but come from that critical illness policy, right? So it's sort of that what works together. We're not trying to go crazy and tell you to change your business, but I think what advisors are starting to realize is that there's more to what they're just offering. So when they're talking to their clients, and I think Bobby just mentioned it, the client may say something, and if they're not paying attention to what the client's saying, they're going to miss it because they're so focused on, well, I'm just trying to sell them this health plan. Okay, well, hold on. Let's make sure. So I do see that a lot in the industry. So I do see a lot of advisors starting to look at what else can I have at least a baseline knowledge about, and what who can I partner with? So groups like Pinnacle that can offer me multiple lines. So I can just call Mark, and he's got somebody on his team there that can make sure that they can talk about the critical illness plan or that whatever it is. So I do think we do see that quite a bit because I do think the world is changing in the sense of retirement planning. And we're looking at the cost of retirement planning. People are living longer, which is great. People are living healthier, which is great. People don't have the incomes to maintain those, right? So if something does happen and they don't have any planning to protect themselves, like critical illness or cancer or any of those other policies that are out there, what limited assets they have in savings that are trying to really be squeezed out for the long term are in peril, right? So I do see a lot of those questions coming. I think the industry's done a good job at really starting to kind of pivot a little bit. Like, okay, you know, our clients have a lot of things going on. We have to make sure that we're helping them on a holistic point of view, not just what our focus is.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just an upsell, and there's always a lot of rules, and I think sometimes agents are worried about compliance and some of those type of things, which is important. I think absolutely there's a lot of things we got to navigate in this world, but certainly there's opportunities. We always suggest agents do at the very least an annual review for clients. That's an easy opportunity, but you should probably have even more touch points throughout the year. I know we have our CRM set up where agents could send out emails on different products, events they might be holding. Maybe the agent wants to hold an open house. I mean, an annual
Yeah.
review is an easy thing to do.
That's excellent. Yeah, like you said, people's needs change. Obviously, their health changes, their finances change. That annual review, again, you're not just doing your customer a favor there by touching base with them again, but it's just you're creating more opportunity for yourself as well. So definitely very important. One of the first things that we'll always mention to agents, especially if they're just starting in the business, you always want to do those annual reviews.
Yeah. Multiple products, Pat. Multiple products. It's not just you want to turn them into the clients, not just policy holders, right?
Right.
I mean, that's just been around forever. But it's one of the things that's true. It wouldn't be around forever. You got to have multiple products, and then you have a client.
And and the whole banking system has this locked down, right? How many different product lines does your bank try and sell to you or position with you? And I say sell in a positive way, not in a negative way. You're right, Bob. It's exactly right. There's so many multiple product lines that are out there that it's just simple marketing 101. The more you have with your client, the more persistency you're going to have. And what's the hardest thing in our business, right? Gaining a client. And then the key is to retain them, right? So if we're offering them everything they need, or at least what they can afford based on their planning, I think that's a big key. And I think, Mark, you make a good point on the annual planning. That is so important, right? And policy review for things are the two best sales ideas out there. There's no better one. I've been in the advanced markets and I've been in executive benefits. I've been doing this in my career for a long time. Those two things are the simplest and easiest things and the most effective things because everything does change. That's the one constant. Things change. So I think, and Mark, you brought up a great one, right? Final expense. Great product when it's needed. People are older. They do need something. They do need coverage. Sometimes it is a medical thing. But you know what? Take a little bit of a look at that. What I just said earlier, people are living longer. They are living healthier. Why should a 69-year-old person who has access to an accelerated underwriting program, who could potentially get preferred or super standard, why should they pay the fees for final expense and get a better product that has living benefits? Now, that won't always work. I understand that. I'm not saying anything negative about final expense at all, but I think it just goes to that storyline of, as an advisor, just take one more step forward. Think a little bit more on just not what you're thinking about, but what the client could benefit, because they could probably benefit from a better whole life product if they're a healthy 69-year-old.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
education is so important because I think a lot of times there's just one of those assumptions. Hey, they're older, they can't pass underwriting. But when you look at these strategies that we have now, these accelerated underwriting programs, there is opportunities for a lot of individuals, and people are living a lot healthier than they were previously. It really is true. They're living longer because they're being more healthy. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
talk a little bit about underwriting. What are we seeing when we talk about simplified underwriting? Obviously, they can't just have left the hospital. I mean, we get that,
Right.
right? But if they're, to your point, a 69-year-old and, maybe they've got a couple of meds that they're on, but they're well controlled, they're not obese, right? There's opportunity there. So can we talk a little bit about sort of the niche?
Yeah, I think underwriting is probably the biggest thing that's changed the most. If you think about, and we'll liken it to the technology piece of it, but also just the underwriting health itself. COVID changed everything, right? That sped up the whole technology piece of it. Like, we had to figure out during COVID as carriers, how do we get people to still get underwritten when we can't do labs, we can't go visit people, we can't do anything, we're stuck in our house. Okay, well, it's amazing how our industry adapted so quickly and improved technology so quickly, right? Because we had to. So I think from the point of view of sort of the technology piece is certainly changing the way we're doing things with the accelerated underwritings, the digital platforms that are out there. And there's this cool new thing out that somebody says might stick around, AI. I think people
I
may or
think
may not have heard of
I've heard about that.
Yeah, I
It
guess maybe.
mentioned, wasn't that a
Mark just
Steven
taught
Spielberg movie like
Well,
from
yeah,
20 years
something
ago?
like that.
Mark just told me how to taught me how to spell it the other day, so I'm good
Yeah.
now.
And they're
I'm an
all
expert.
right. All right.
Yeah.
Baby
I have to
steps.
test
Baby
you
steps.
later.
Don't rush it. Don't rush it. But I think AI is a very important topic, right? Not for all the negative reasons, but the positive reasons as well. Access to summarizing medical records and a lot of the stuff that can help the process, help the cost, get away from some of the manual touches that underwriting does. So from that piece of it, it's certainly helping out what we're doing and what we're seeing. But the second piece of it is, the positive thing about, like we just talked about, living more healthier, lives in our retirement ages. Think about diabetes or prostate cancer, or those aren't as bad, and I'll say that in quotations, as they used to be. If you had prostate cancer 20 years ago, you know, it was bad luck. Nowadays, if you're getting it early enough, it's not a big deal. And I don't mean it in a it's like, oh my God, no big. It is a big deal, but not like it used to be. So underwriters are able to look at that a little bit differently with offers. Same thing with diabetes, right? There's so many different levels of diabetes now that the majority of them we can still get underwritten without going to an impaired risk type of product. We just there might be a table rating, maybe depending, but I think the overall improvements in the medical world from the thing are really helping clients, but at the same time causing some pressures because now they're living longer, healthier lives. So it's that good and bad, kind of two double bladed knife there, which we're going to focus on. So I think a lot of underwriters are certainly looking at a lot of different avenues. For a while, a few years, the marijuana market was a big deal, right? Who would do it? Who wouldn't do it? Now it's like no big deal, right? Pretty much everybody does it. It's not a big deal. There's still some people will still kick it and things like that, but not like it used to be, right? It was so taboo before. It's just not now. That progression and that experience and growth within the underwriting piece of it, I think, is so key to again going back to the annual review.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, absolutely. And Mark, I know internally we get a lot of agents that are sort of like, what's the process? So the process from the agent point of view is really probably just asking a couple additional questions at the end of the
Yeah.
day, maybe giving us 4 or 5 pieces of information, and then really our team takes it and does the upfront
Yeah.
evaluation
Yeah, absolutely.
before the
Yeah.
agent even has to go into an
Yeah,
application.
exactly. Just a couple quick questions. Maybe just a list of any medications that they're taking, when were they diagnosed, things like that. And then we'll go and, do the research, come back to them within a couple minutes, couple hours,
Yeah,
pretty much always the same day. It's very quick.
yeah, and to be honest, if they're doing the health product, they probably have asked most of those questions anyway.
Yeah.
They probably have the answers to, hey, what are your conditions? Are you seeing any specialists?
Right.
Oh, for what? And what are the medications you're taking? Oh, for what?
Right.
How long have you been taking those? So a lot of this stuff isn't even really additional. It's just providing that information, say, to our team that, Mark can then, talk with the people at Assurity and say, hey, what's a good fit? Is this going to qualify before the agent even really has to go down
Yeah.
the road? They can't really do a life sale. We know the rules on a Medicare Advantage sale, for example. It's not part of the scope of appointment. We understand that part of it, but certainly if that's your only touch with the client is that
Yeah.
one time, you're doing something wrong in your process. There's a lot of opportunities to sell those other products that really help the client out, right?
Right.
So, Pat, is it that we're seeing those simplified issues? Those are just coming off the charts. The critical illness, is that taking a little bit more of a center stage? What would we say is the most utilized product? Maybe what's one of those underrated products that we think maybe can get used a little bit more?
I think for me, it's just income protection, disability insurance as a whole, and I'll explain why. One, obviously, no matter what kind of planning we do. Now, this doesn't obviously apply to the senior market space, so this is like U65, right? So we do understand that, but I can get to that in a second. I do think from the U65, it's going to be disability because no matter what kind of planning we're doing, long-term care, any of the other stuff, income is important, right? We need to be able to pay for that plan. It is the fuel that drives whatever it is that we're doing. At that same point, there's so many different variations of disability to include emotional long-term disability that we all understand. But there's also short-term disability that pays a weekly benefit. So if you have a part-time person who has 3 different part-time jobs, they're not going to have a full benefit suite. So if something happens to them, but a short-term disability will pay them a weekly benefit, right? If you have a disability program and you go to somebody like a Mass Mutual, great company, Principal, great company, but they decline you, a surety, and this is sort of an surety plug just for a second because we're unique to this. We have a graded benefit product that about 70% of the time will give them an option. And that's why I bring this up, Bob, because I think with disability, it goes down into critical illness, to AD&D, to accident. We as advisors have to make sure that we have a pivot if something's not going to work, whatever that is. This health plan's not going to work. Okay, well, what do? We can't do this, but here's what we can do. We can't do this, but here's what we can get you qualified for. You know, it's not a great example in the sense that you can't get your disability. We may go all the way down to a guaranteed issue accident plan. It's not going to give you everything, but it's going to give you something, right? So it's that pivot with the disability that I think is so important. And it does play off of those other products. I think that's the key. Just like ACA shops, right? Or that are out there. A guaranteed accident plan is a great thing to add to those offices. And I know we have a couple Pinnacle offices we're going to be visiting here in Florida in a couple weeks that we're looking to add that individual product to that market space, going back to, which it always comes back to, those cross-selling efforts, right? You're already with the client. You already have all the information. There's nothing new here. There's no magic. It's just taking one more step or saying, hey, where does this fit? So I would say, to answer that long-winded answer, Bob, I would say that disability for me is that one pivot product that I think we need to focus more on because it is the driving force, at least for the U65.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and we have a ton of our agents that are doing the underage products, whether it's the ACA and ancillary is a great cross sell there as well. Great opportunity. We know there's tons of changes. Look what's going on in the ACA market with all the subsidies. I mean, there's a ton of different changes that are going on. There's always gaps and holes in what's being covered. So there is just the need to have some of these other products that you can talk to about with the clients. I mean, you've got to have basic knowledge of some of these opportunities that are out there.
Absolutely. And like you said, Pat, you need to be able to pivot to something else instead of walking away saying, well, there's nothing I can offer you. With the accident only plan, guaranteed issue, I mean, there's no reason why you can't offer that if all else fails. So I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, it's so important. I love that you're going out to visit down in Florida. It made me think of something because a lot of our agents and I don't know the answer to this, so maybe you can enlighten me. Are you seeing, like we see in the Medicare space and the health space, a lot of business that's going on in what we call the multicultural markets? So it's those Hispanic marketplaces, it's Asian, whatever we want to talk about, because we see a lot of that in our space. Does Assurity see much going on there when we're talking about some of these simplified issued opportunities?
So I actually have a note in here to connect with Mark and Greg to talk about this. So yes, absolutely. I think that whole foreign national market space or multicultural market space. So my boss on Young Botello is Korean, and she calls it multicultural. She doesn't like foreign national. She so, but yes, I think that is a very big market space because the reality is we're a diverse country, right? Regardless of what people think and take the politics out of it, we're a diverse country. It's what makes us great. And so we do see a lot of those market spaces, especially with ACA shops. There's a lot of Latin type influences down there. When you go out to the West Coast or even up in the East Coast and the Northeast, there's a lot of Asian influence, a lot of Indian influence. So yeah, so those markets we do see a lot of. We on a lot of our products we have a foreign national program, just like many carriers do. Even with disability, people don't understand that. If you're here on a visa, we can still write you a disability policy if you're on. We have about 10 different visas that we allow. If you've been here for 2 years and on these visas and they're still active visas, we can get you a DI policy. And the key to that is if they go back to India, the policy will still pay down the road. It's not something that goes away. If they're here and they're on the visa and everything's fine, so those are important. So we do see a lot of that market space. If you're an advisor that looks at this market space or has a natural, whether you are Korean or you're Indian, The one thing I love about those market spaces is that they plan and base sales and base helping each other out on community, right? They're not just focused on, I need to become the wealthiest people in the world. They truly are doing it to build and protect their communities, right? So I think it's a really important market that, that foreign national space is becoming key. And from business stuff, we'll look at I-10s, which they use for businesses, which is kind of a tax ID number that can be used. It's not a social security number if they're illegal. The one thing you hear a lot of time, well, I'm not, what's going on in the, cross border stuff now and all this ICE stuff. And like, look, we're not the IRS. We're just here helping you plan and protect your family and your business. And, we don't care. I don't mean it that way, but you know what I'm saying. Like, we're here to help your family. That's what we do. Because in my mind, like, if you look at my LinkedIn, right, my big thing across the top is what we do matters. And I believe that. I believe what we do matters every day. So that's a great market, Bob, that I think that more advisors, especially those that have access to those, whether they're Jewish, Asian, Indian, work with what you know, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pull out my crystal ball here, Mark, and
Okay.
I foresee a
Johnny Carson over here.
yeah. Let me see. I foresee a webinar on the multicultural foreign national programs with Assurity in the near future. I just that's
Oh,
just me. I feel
absolutely.
like that's probably going to happen here in the near
Hold on,
future.
I'm writing that down.
I
Somebody take
I
a
think
note.
I think we could definitely do it too. I mean, we could even have it in both English and Spanish. We could bring JC or Andy in and
Absolutely. Abs-
have some fun with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because to your point, I just think assumptions are made on what can be done, what can't
Right.
be done, what products can be sold or
Right.
can't be sold to individuals. And I think maybe putting a little clarity around those opportunities would definitely be helpful with
Yeah.
some
Absolutely.
education out there. So no, I
Yeah.
think that's great. I appreciate
And we have
that.
multicultural materials too for Spanish, Mandarin, so we do understand that market space. So we do have some things that not for all of our products, but for a good number of our products, we do have that because we understand it's an important market space. Somebody who doesn't speak English and they speak Spanish has the same needs that we all do, right? There's no difference. They don't know English. They need it in Spanish. That's all. So we do have those kind of things too. Many carriers do.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Um, so looking down the road, let's just think about the next 12 months. So we're in May now, which is kind of crazy, but so
Crazy.
it's going to be for our Medicare people. It's going to start hitting here soon, so they're going to start getting busy. So
Before you know it.
realistically, and I always want to mention this because Medicare sort of is a product that has different seasons, if you would. There's the AEP, there's the OEP. There's no acronym that Medicare doesn't enjoy throwing out there. I mean, for sure, so there's a lot around that. But I
I'm
always
an ex-military guy, Bob, and the military has less acronyms than Medicare does.
I 100% believe that's true. Uh, so I always like to point this out. So when we talk about life insurance, when we talk about products like disability, annuity, some of these other things, I always like to mention the selling season, the time frames around that as well. So the time frame starts, Mark, I think you know this, January 1st,
Yep.
and those time frames end December 31st.
Exactly.
So for everybody out there, from January 1st to December 31st, that's the selling opportunities for products outside of what we would consider those Medicare timeframes. So
Exactly.
a lot of chances to talk to your clients and to do some marketing around some of these other spaces, right? Which I think is important because we all want to make sure we're building our business, which obviously,
Yeah.
Pat, the underage stuff can lead to the Medicare sales down the road, right? You're building the funnel.
We're all going to get there. We're all going to get there. And I think on the time frames that is important, right? So one of the things like the offices we're going to be seeing in Miami with JC actually is based on us realizing that at a surety. And I sent, Mark and Greg a note a while back, like, hey, here's what we're doing some ACA shops. I know you mentioned one. We started that months ago. So we're going to be going to see them in 2 weeks because we know around that end of July timeframe, they're going to be out of pocket. Ancillary stuff won't matter. So we're trying to at least show it to them ahead of time, because I do think that's important. But for the other stuff, what you all call ancillary, because I think it's backwards when you're a life guy, The Medicare stuff is all ancillary, and it's a twisted market space, but that's okay. Our selling season is January 1 to December 31st. Absolutely, I agree with that. That's why New Year's Eve is such a big time because
Yeah.
December 31st,
Yeah.
people are tired.
Yeah. For the little fun fact here, for those of you that have only been in Medicare for maybe the last 10 years, AEP for probably the first 15 years, I forget exactly when it changed. The end of AEP was December 31st. And we're
Oh, wow.
talking about that was the selling season, ended on New Year's Eve.
Wow.
If
Yeah.
you remember, nobody was doing electronic enrollment. So we had paper apps. We had agents showing up at our
Man.
door at 10 o'clock at night to get, there was
Christmas
no
Eve.
such thing as fun New Year's Eve in the Medicare space for many years.
Wow.
A lot of people I don't think are aware of that. When it changed to December 7th, we threw a party here. That was the greatest thing we ever heard.
I remember those days. You can tell by my gray hair. I remember working late to December 31st to get cases through.
Oh my
I
goodness.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, but
I
listen,
love technology.
yeah, Pat, we really appreciate you jumping on with us. A lot of
Absolutely.
good stuff. I think we want to continue this with some other trainings,
Yeah.
setting up. If your office is available for some training, we can even set it up for you. You can see we're actively doing that now before it gets a little bit too crazy. So reach out to the team here,
Yeah.
get with Mark and Greg, and they can coordinate all that good stuff. But Pat, there's a ton more to come, I'm sure, for the rest of this year. Any final words from you? You want to throw out there to the audience?
No, I appreciate the time and having me on. I've enjoyed the year working with Pinnacle. One thing I will say is you want to do it right, and Mark and Greg have got me involved in a lot of things. And like I said, the week after championship, I was already doing some face-to-face meetings with different groups, and there's been a few offices that we really tied in well with. We've had some long discussions with Evan on some of the ancillary type stuff. Like I said, we're going down to see JC. You guys really kind of walk the walk, so I think it's really good because I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot of opportunity. And sometimes you just need a group like Pinnacle and good carriers to tie that all together to make you successful as an advisor. As an advisor, you need a team. You can't know everything, right? And so I firmly believe that. And I'll end with what I talked about earlier. What we do matters.
Absolutely. No,
Excellent.
that's a great way to sum it up, man. We all have to keep that in mind that we are helping people and what we do matters. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Mark,
absolutely. Well,
let's round things up, man. Pat,
Cheers,
Thank you
guys.
so much,
Cheers.
Pat.
to you.
We appreciate it,
we'll
my
see you
friend.
soon, and we'll tell you what was in these drinks. But we're having a
Perfect.
good time. All right, man.
You owe me one.
I owe you
Will
one.
do.
Take it
See
easy.
you soon, Pat. Thanks, bud.
Thank you again.